Okay, we are back again with another Between the Pages book chat, and today we have fantasy author D.A. Randall, and he's here to talk about his Red Rider Saga. And I'm going to turn it over to him and let him introduce himself. So take it away.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm D.A. Randall, and I write fantasy and paranormal thrillers that read like blockbuster movies. And right now, what I'm mainly focusing on is the Red Rider Saga. It's about a 16-year-old scar-faced Red Riding Hood who is fighting a sinister cult of werewolves. And when she was 7 years old, she was attacked by a wolf that clawed her face and left her with three triple scars across her face. She's grown up being in just kind of outcast and bullied by people in her town. It's based on it's a fairy tale France that's based on early 17th century, or early 18th century rather. But she and her family kind of go into hiding and seclusion for years because they're afraid of any kind of attack like this happening again. And so she's not allowed to wear the red hooded cloak she loved so much. They don't want to draw attention. They don't ever stay out after dark. They're just kind of huddling inside, kind of like during COVID. And when she gets older, there are a number of tragic things that happen. She finds out that other people are being attacked by wolves as well, and nobody seems to be able to do anything about it to stop it. She learns how to hunt and how to fight, and when she becomes 16, she decides that she's had enough and no one is doing anything, so she's going to go hunt down the wolves herself. And she finds a large red hooded cloak that reminds her of what she wore when she was a child. And she wears that as a symbol to the wolves that someone's fighting back. And also it's kind of to bolster her own courage as she's fighting them. It helps her feel more confident. And then she goes off and kind of initiates her own war against the wolves and learns how to kill them, and then starts striking terror into their hearts the way they used to make her afraid. Now she's making them afraid of her.
Okay, so obvious inspiration for the book series is the Red Riding Hood fairy tale.
Right.
So did you have any other inspirations for the series?
Yeah, actually I had a lot. The initial concept was from two things. The Red Riding Hood movie that came out, which wasn't a great movie, but the concept was, I thought was fantastic, to take the idea of the big bad wolf being a werewolf. And I'm sure they're not the first people that have come up with that concept at all, but it was the first huge mainstream idea of that. And that came out, and then just after that, the series Once Upon a Time started in the fall, where they took Snow White, who's this charming, innocent fairy tale princess, and they turned her into a Robin Hood type outlaw who's shooting people out in the woods. So I kind of combined those two concepts together and came up with this Red Rider character. And there are a lot of other influences into it. She's kind of like a combination between Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Batman. So there are a lot of character influences from those two fandoms that have inspired different characters I wrote into this. I was also inspired by some of the side characters from Harry Potter. And I've based some family, side extended family characters on some of the characters from Harry Potter as an inspiration. And also I was inspired by the bad guys in the Karate Kid movie and the mentoring relationship there. The lycanthrope, who are the cult of werewolves, their cruelty and their kind of outlook on life is really much based on the kind of Cobra Kai bullying and pursuing power at all costs. And then finally, it's a rural environment that I based a lot of the environment and the townspeople on the Little House on the Prairie TV series. So I got influenced a lot.
Okay, so you mentioned like a historical French setting. So why did you go with that setting?
When I did research on Red Riding Hood, what I found was what's commonly accepted as the most popular version of Red Riding Hood is the one that was written by Charles Perrault, who has also written the most popular version of Cinderella.
Mm.
And so I just set it in France around that time. Then, as I kept researching further, I found that fairy tales themselves originated around that time, and they weren't for kids. They weren't even necessarily for just adults. They were for royalty. They were cautionary tales that people like Charles Perrault and others wrote for royalty to say you should be careful about, corrupt people that you might be surrounded with, people who are just using you for their own ends. And so that's what a lot of the fairy tales like Red Riding Hood were for. Red Riding Hood particularly had a subtext of be careful that you're not seduced by somebody who's really acting innocent and helpful, but really they're just a wolf. So it worked out very well. And then as I researched further, a friend of mine, as I was working on this story, he sent me a link to an article. In real life, there was between 1700 and around 1750, I believe. I don't remember the exact dates, but throughout some provinces of France, there is this wolf that was large that was attacking a lot of people, and it kind of became a horror story throughout the country. It was called the Beast of I can't pronounce this right, Gévaudan. And it's a historical monster story of a whole lot of people that were getting attacked by a very large wolf throughout different provinces. So it ended up being a perfect time setting for everything I'm doing. And I don't name the setting, the time, other than that it's in France in a fairy tale made up province. But that's just the framework I use for myself.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the main character, what she's like, her best traits or flaws.
Okay, Helena Basque. The quickest way to get an idea on her character is that if her name comes from sounding out hell in a basket. When you think of Red Riding Hood, you think of her having a basket of goodies, and it's like, but she determines to go out and fight these wolves, and that's what she becomes to them. Is she's actually terrifying. Same way that Batman frightens his criminal enemies. She just, when people see her red hood, they know that she's the one person who knows how to kill them, because she's discovered their weakness of silver. So she has grown up being bullied, and being scarred, having these scars across her face. The immediate reaction people have is that she's an ugly, marred child. And that's how she's grown up. She's also grown up being sheltered by her father, who is understandably very overprotective. And the only one she knows that really just accepts her as she is, there's a priest, Father Bastille, and other than that, she looks at her childhood friend Pierre, who has a major crush on her. He doesn't see her as ugly at all, but she's had to deal with that kind of rejection and insults her whole life, and being put down and being told that there's things she just can't do. They have to hide so that they don't get attacked by wolves again. And she determines later on, as she's growing up, she doesn't want to stay in that position where she has to be afraid. And so she convinces a friend secretly to teach her how to fight, so that bullies aren't beating her up anymore. She later persuades her father to teach her how to hunt, in case he's not there if the wolves attack again. And she becomes a really super skilled hunter, and starts getting confidence. But at the same time, she's becoming less and less feminine according to the norms of that society. She, when she finally decides she's going to go hunting the wolves down, she asks Pierre to help her get some weapons, to get some trousers, men's trousers she can wear, and some boots, so that she can be free to move around and run and climb trees and shoot. So she gets more and more isolated from society, and more of a kind of a pariah. And so she's very much like Buffy the Vampire Slayer in that she's having to do something she doesn't necessarily want to do. But unlike Buffy, she knows she's choosing to do this for herself because no one else will do it. So she wants to make sure that someone is fighting the wolves and destroying them.
Okay, so does she have her own little Scooby Gang too, or is it just her?
Yes and no. It's she does, but they're in secret. So like Pierre supplies her weapons. He's kind of the steampunk aspect of this world that she's in, and I call it lever punk, since it's before any kind of machinery like that. But he creates this repeating crossbow for her that it's a Chinese crossbow that in the story I just show that Pierre's read about, and he just created his own based on their design. But you can load up to 10 bolts in the top slot of it, and then you just fire one bolt after another like a Tommy gun, and then you reload. So she, when they find out silver works, they start tipping her bolts with silver, and then she can kill a lot of wolves at once. He also makes a grappling hook for her, and some other weapons. And then she also has other people who secretly give her information and encouragement and things. But as far as the wolves know, it's just her doing all the fighting.
Cool. So, what was the hardest scene or type of scene for you to write in the series?
I'm trying to think, because I it's a very emotional story. I mean, it's like packed with all ranges of emotions. That actually isn't difficult for me to write. The most difficult thing I think was when I was writing the first story, coming to the end of it, which that's actually the end of book 3 now. This originally was written back in 2013 as one story. I've now revised it and putting it out as this is the first story, which is a novella. It's all a brand new story that I came up with. And then the story that I wrote originally starts in Red Rider Book 2, Red Rider Rising, and Book 3, Red Rider Redemption, concludes it. That conclusion was really hard for me to come up with because the story flowed so easily the whole time I was writing it. And that was great. And then I came to figuring out how to have a big epic conclusion, and I had a few different ideas, but it was going into the end of it and still not knowing how I was going to actually end it until probably a couple of weeks before I started writing that. That was difficult. The other thing that was difficult was after writing the original story, writing a sequel for it and feeling a lot of pressure suddenly that I really wanted it to be as great as the first story. And I had everything outlined of what I was going to do, but I just had trouble getting started. But, once I made myself just start writing it, it started to flow again.
Okay, so what was your favorite scene or type of scene to write in the series?
Well, as of now, I think I have a couple in the new Red Rider story. The novella, my favorite scene is the very end because it gets much more intense than some of the stories the other stories do, where you're really, as you're reading it, even though this is an ongoing story with a hero and she'll survive like Rambo or James Bond. At the end of the first Red Rider novella, it really feels like she's not going to make it at all. And that was pretty exciting to write. The other thing is more of a fun aspect in the Red Rider Redemption story that's out as an ebook now. It's she has to infiltrate a fancy dress ball in order to stop the werewolves. And so she goes in disguise and she's trying to act like she fits in. And of course, that's her biggest flaw is she can't be nice and kind and polite. And so she's trying to say things that she thinks the typical spoiled, well-coiffed airhead would say. And so she's saying things that kind of are mocking them, and she's trying to fit in. And it's just a really, really fun scene.
It sounds like it. So, are any of your secondary characters a little quirky or scene stealers?
Quirky or what?
Scene stealers.
Oh yes. Well, it's an enjoyable cast of characters, and so they're all very interesting for me. I think probably the one that is the biggest scene stealer for me right now is her father, who is I describe him in one of the books as brutally practical. He takes her out to teach her how to hunt, and um, as they're out, she's only like 8 years old, but she insists she needs to know how to hunt. So he's like, okay, if we're going to do this, then you have to do exactly what I say. You can't argue with me. This is how we're doing it. She's like, fine. But then once they're out there, she's just a little girl. She gets scrapes and cuts, and she's wanting to be coddled a little bit, and he starts to want to do that, but he stops himself and says, "No, you're gonna have to take care of that yourself. If you're bleeding, then either you bandage it, or you just keep bleeding. Or if you want to go home to mom, go right ahead." But she knows that if she does that, then he'll never take her hunting again. So she pushes through everything and starts becoming very tough, and uh, and that concerns her mother because she's starting to be, as she's growing up, she's kind of becoming more like a man instead of a girl and having friends. But his character is very interesting because he's a little too rough, but he's rough and overprotective because he feels that that's the only way to keep everyone safe.
Okay, so what character would you like to hang out with in real life?
Father of a Steel. He is kind of like a spiritual Mr. Rogers. He's also quirky to Helena, especially at first because she doesn't know whose side he's on, and he seems to just want to be, praying about situations and um, trying to talk to people and talk things over and give them things that will help them, but he's not. He doesn't want to go out and fight, and he's concerned about her actually killing people since they're human beings who turn into wolves. So they butt heads a lot, but as a character, he's as you get to know him, you realize no matter what's going on, he always has your back. He will always support you. He'll always do whatever it is necessary to help you.
Okay, so besides fantasy, are there any other genres you'd like to explore, or have you explored any other genres?
I have. I've actually been self-published since 2013. And what I have found is I've written action, adventure, and suspense, and some short stories, um, and an instructional book about writing. But because things are kind of all over in different genres, I haven't made as much progress, with connecting with readers as I need to. So that's why I'm focusing on this series now to get everything finished, and then once I've got that finished, then I'll move on to some other fantasy stories, branch off into some other short stories and suspense thrillers.
Oh, that sounds interesting and lots to look forward to.
Yes.
So I think we'll wrap it up here, and I'll let you tell everyone where they can find you and your books.
Yeah, you can find the Red Rider Saga, different books on Amazon under my name D.A. Randall. That's actually my one of my pen names. My real name is Randall Allen Dunn, and you can find my other books under that name. Again, you can find those on Amazon, and you'll also be able to find some of my other books under Randall Allen Dunn at Barnes and Noble online or other places.
Okay, so thank you for being here. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you.
And between the pages, we'll be back next weekend with some more authors, and we have a very special author for Halloween. So please join us then, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Take care.